some music and some fun. With Dangerous Dick and his crew hand-picked duckbusters, everyone. And we're here to sing till the rafters ring and our throats are feeling raw. Then we'll head back down to the underground, cause we're cavers to the core.
At Carlsbad Caverns National Park for the summer. I started caving in England. I joined the Oxford Caving Club, and I went on one single trip during that whole semester because all the other activities was just drinking at the pub. But that one trip really stuck with me, so a few years later I came back to the US, and I always remembered how much fun I had, so I looked up, caving. I found the NSS and I found my local grotto, and I started caving more and more. And one day, Tommy Shiflett, who is the co-leader for PESH, came to my grotto and he gave a presentation. And at the time, I was a pretty novice caver, but I knew that this is something that I wanted to do. So after the presentation, I went up to him and I said, I want to do this one day. I'm not ready now, but can you tell me what skills I need to work on so that I can get ready? And he told me, learn how to survey, learn how to sketch if you can, and learn vertical. And with those two things, you should be good because sketchers are usually in need on expeditions. So that's exactly what I did. And I was really surprised, but he invited me to PESH that year. And so I decided to accept with the condition that I was going to train as hard as I could. And I trained every single day, setting up a rope treadmill in my mom's garage. And she used to belay me actually when I would run 600 feet of rope every day. And I also learned how to sketch as well. So that's kind of what I did. So my first year with PESH was last year, and this year I went again. And I actually went on a lot of adventures this year. So I went to China for a month, and I spent 2 weeks on a homemade Gui expedition to Luoshui-Kong. And I was also visiting my family in China. And I have a photo of that, my family in China. And this is a photo from Luoshui-Kong, which had a 220-meter entrance pit, which we climbed every day. So that really whipped me into shape for my next expedition, which was at Cheve. I spent 1 month at Cheve, and then I spent a month at PESH, and this is the PESH team. So I've gone to a few expeditions in the past 3 months, but the reason I wanted to talk about PESH is because Arya can talk about Cheve next time. No, but the real reason is because I think PESH is the most accessible expedition. So if you want to go on an expedition, PESH is a really good place to start. They're very egalitarian about their process. You have to contact Bill Steele by August 1st to be considered. And even if you have a relationship with the expedition or with Bill or anything, if you don't contact him by this date, you won't be able to go. And so that's nice because if you're a newcomer, you contact them by that date, you will be considered. And if you have the skills necessary, you may be invited. So that's what I like about PESH. The essential skills that you need, so no one will give you any metrics, and these are metrics that I made up, but it is really useful to have some metrics on what kind of skill that you need to go on an expedition, just so that you don't show up completely unprepared. So I would say that you need to be able to climb at least 1,000 feet of rope by frogging in one go without trouble. You need to pass relays easily, in seconds. It should be a fluid thing for you. You need to be able to carry a 30 to 50 pound pack for long periods of time, say 12 hours. And you need to be able to read survey instruments at least. If you can sketch, that's great, and that's a really valuable skill, but at the bare minimum, you have to be able to survey. And you need enough stamina for 12 to 16 hour trips, as well as the agility to move through caves. And other helpful skills is sketching and being able to speak Spanish, particularly for the Mexico expeditions. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the culture around PESH. So PESH is Proyecto Espeleológico Sistema Huautla, and it takes place in Oaxaca, Mexico, specifically in Huautla, which is what it's named after. And the local people there are called the Mazatecs, and they have some very traditional beliefs about the caves. In the past, cavers and foreigners have had bad relationships with the Mazatecs because Maria Sabina is a famous curandera there, so a witch doctor, and they use mushrooms to treat ailments, I guess. And so a lot of hippies started going to Waltla to you know, get high and use mushrooms and things like that. And so the locals kind of developed a really bad taste for foreigners. And also, I think in the past, cavers weren't really great about asking for permission to go into, you know, their land and explore. So one thing I really like that Pesh does is they are very respectful of local customs and traditions, and they make a huge effort to educate the locals on what we're doing, because there's a really strong belief that we're stealing gold from the caves, because they are like, why would you want to go into a cave? And I'm sure many of you have been asked that yourself, right? And I'm never really sure how to answer. But there is no gold. So what we did this year to appease the locals is we did a ceremony, and I actually missed this, so I heard about this. But basically the curandero took olive branches and like waved them on every single person while chanting prayers. And then he gave us all gifts to give to the cave, which included a bottle of cacao water, blessed almonds, and tobacco. So we did leave this at the entrance of the cave as an offering to it. And then another cave that I went to, the local curandera was very involved. And every time we went to the cave, she would meet us and walk us there and do a prayer for our safety before we entered the cave. And every time we exited the cave, we also did another prayer as well. So Sistema Waltla is an extensive cave system in the Sierra Mazatec Mountains. It is, so this photo is a little old, but it's currently over 75 kilometers and it's 1,560 meters deep. It's the deepest cave in the Western Hemisphere. It's at the very north of Oaxaca. This would be really nice on a big map. Okay, well this is the cave system overlaid on a topographic map. All right. I'm going to skip this because I know you guys can't even see it. Okay, so the goals for PESH 2019 were to go to a new area called Plan de Escoba, to connect Nida Nashi to La Grieta. So La Grieta is an established section of Waltla that we've been working on for the past several years. So we were going to connect another cave to the system. Push Camp 3 leads, and Camp 3 is in La Grieta. It's one of the furthest points in the cave. It takes 10 hours to get there at my speed. So it takes 6 to 8 hours for some other people, but also it takes much longer for some others. Sotano de Agua de Carrizo was a cave that we connected to the system last year, so they were going to check further leads there. And we had discovered a set of giant sloth bones in a cave, and so Mexican paleontologists were going to come and extract those. Additional goals that ended up, coming up during the expedition was connect small caves to Carrizo and push Camp 2 leads. Camp 2 is also in the La Grieta section. So I'm going to talk more in depth about some of these, but I will say that the sloth bones never worked out. The paleontologists were not able to get the appropriate permits because it was during the Easter week. So it was a big holiday in Mexico, and they went to the government office every single day and waited hours and hours and hours to talk to the mayor, and was never successful. So, there's some bureaucracy.
Well, it was loose on the wall end. Did you say cow water?
Cacao.
Oh, okay.
But I will talk about cow water later. Waltla is known for its dirty water. There's a lot of cow shit and human feces that goes into the system. It's very, very dirty. And so when you climb up waterfalls, it's very tight-lipped. You don't want to get anything in there. People have gotten sick that way.
Snorkel.
Yeah. Let me go back and show you guys the maps. Okay, so this is the. Can we turn the light on?
Yeah.
I think I did it.
Yeah. It's always.
Make it dark. You know how to.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Want to hold it off?
Can you guys see it?
That's good.
Okay. Okay, so I just wanted to help orient you guys a little bit, and also myself. Where's Waltlo? So this is Waltlo, the capital. This is where we would drive for internet and groceries. Down here is San Andreas. This is another smaller town where we would also go for internet and groceries. And they would go every day to town to get food. Where's Plan Carlota? Plan Carlota is where we set up our base camp. And I'm not seeing it on here right now. But this green part is La Grieta. Plan de Escoba is up there. I don't know if you guys can see it. So that's the new area that we had just got permission to go to last year. And they did do a lot of exploration, but it's still quite a long way from actually connecting to the system. As you can see, there's quite a lot of distance there. Okay, this is the system map. The pink part is La Grieta, and that's what I'll be mostly talking about. The past several years of PESH has been focused on La Grieta, and that's where I spent most of my time last year and this year. Okay, another map of La Grieta. So this is where's the entrance? The entrance is here. So it drops the full depth of the cave within this section. Okay, so it basically is like drop, 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 drop. I wish I knew exactly how deep it is, but I'm not good with remembering those kinds of numbers, but I want to say 600 meters. So it drops the full depth to here, and then all the way up there is just a gradual incline. So it's mostly horizontal caving with a few nuisance drops, but most of them you can kind of free climb anyways. So this is Camp 1.5, and Camp 3 is over here. So these are my reference points when I'm talking about Camp 3. Camp 2 is actually down here. So it's not exactly in consecutive order. And there was a big discovery at Camp 2 this year. So this is called the Elbow. And the big discovery went up north, and I'll talk about that more. Camp 3 is up here. This is Mexiguia, and further than that, it goes pretty close to the surface. So one of our goals was try to push the further leads and actually hope to connect to the surface. We did not, but we did find a dome, which is exciting. And then this is the profile view. So you can, if you look at the pink, you can see how I said it drops immediately and then it kind of gradually increases. And you can see at the very far end, it gets pretty close. You know, imagine you're on a mountain, so it's getting very close to the surface there. Okay, so like I said, these were the goals. I will, let's see. Yeah, I think I'll talk about most of these in depth later. I'm going to talk about La Grieta first because, like I said, this is where I spent most of my time last year as well as this year. So for this expedition, we checked our inventory and it said that we had 2 camp stoves. When we arrived at camp, there were no camp stoves. We were pretty devastated because it had actually taken us 2 days to get there because one of our team members was a little bit slow and had to turn around and exit the cave because we were planning to push some objectives very far past Camp 3, and at the rate that person was going, it was just impossible to make it there, so he asked if he could leave, and we agreed. So it took us 2 days to get to Camp 3, which I said is normally for me a 10-hour journey. So we were hungry, we were ready for some warm food, and we arrived and there was none, and we were I was devastated. That was the most upset I've ever been in a cave. I was trying not to cry, I was thinking about leaving the next day. It was a bad state of mind. But thankfully, right before we left, the chef Vico shoved into our hands a bottle of candles, and a bottle of mezcal, and a bottle of hot sauce. And those 3 things single-handedly made the rest of the trip better for me. And so Fernando actually put together the candles because I was too upset to even try. I was just like, we have no stove, you know, I don't want to be here. But he came and he put them together, and we actually managed to heat up water enough to have a hot dinner. But cold breakfasts, but still, hot dinner was something I still look forward to. So last year I went to Camp 3 and I worked on a bolt climb. with a Mexican caver, and we got pretty far, but we didn't finish it. So my goal this year was to go and finish that bolt climb. The next day, one of our members was feeling sick, so I ended up joining Fernando and Abby on their trip way past Camp 3, which was an exhausting journey. It was 5 hours one way, and then we surveyed this horrible muddy crawl, but then we ended up finding this beautiful dome. And this is the part that's really close to the surface, so this is pretty exciting because it's going straight up, and we're right there. So, and this is an area of Mexico where we have not gotten permission to go, so it would be nice to find our way in the other way. Okay, so this is a map of the area of the dome climb where we were working. So this is Turkey Falls, and the dome climb that we were working on was right here. So I wanted to just show that there's a ton of white space right here. So there's a lot of potential. So Abby and I worked on the dome climb, or the bolt climb, and we managed to cross over the traverse, and we got into a passage that had huge pieces of breakdown. And I'm not a caving expert, but to me, huge pieces of breakdown means a huge room. And sure enough, we climbed through house-sized boulders of breakdown into a giant room. And before we got there, I started shouting to hear for the echo. And I was getting back a 3 to 4 second echo, so I was getting very excited. And I was whooping and hollering, and we popped out into this huge room, and we kept exploring until we got to a 50-meter dome, which is pictured on the right. And then we decided that we should call it a day and go home. It was midnight when we decided to go home, and it's a 3-hour journey back to camp. So we got back at 3 a.m., and from then on our schedule was pretty offset. But we decided to name it, that whole room, Sister Midnight, because we found it at midnight and it was just 2 girls. So then we went back for another trip to Camp 3, and we packed a stove, and Abby labeled it Property of Camp 3. We wanted to make sure no one else took it, as well as our bottle of morale. So our goal for this trip was to finish that bolt climb of the 50-meter dome. This is us preparing to go into the cave. And we actually found an exoskeleton of the scorpion that no one has ever caught in Mexico. It's a subaqueous scorpion, so it lives and hunts underwater, and it's cave adapted, and it's unique to this cave. This is me working on the bolt climb. So it's 50 meters, and Abby and I took 3 days taking turns climbing it. And then, unfortunately, when we got to the top, there was another 50-meter dome, and I was not having it. So we decided to give up on that effort. Hopefully someone else will go back there and climb it, or even more hopefully we can get permission to go to that area and look from the top down, which is much easier than bolt climbing up. And this goal was actually unsuccessful, although we got extremely close. So Nidanashi had been explored 30 years ago to a depth, I want to say, of 650 meters. And when they did the line plot, it came within 50 meters of Mexiguia, which is close to Camp 3. So they thought that if they just continued rigging and kept exploring at the bottom, they would be able to make the connection. So I went into Nidanashi for one day to do some surface surveying. At this time, this was the end of towards the end of 3 months of caving, and my body was in bad shape. I was having all kinds of skin problems, like itching, and had a foot like sore, an open sore on my foot, and a cut on my hand. So when I went here, I said I need some easy, dry survey. I do not want to be wet, because all the stuff in Camp 3, you're wet for 12 hours a day, every day. And I actually did get a bad skin infection from that, which I'm still dealing with now. So anyways, this was my nice, easy day of surveying, which was a lot of fun. This was the rigging team. So the goal was, this cave was already surveyed, so they were just rigging to the bottom, and then they would keep surveying. The rigging was really difficult because they had bad rock and they were constantly in water. So So they ended up setting up a warming up station. So like I said, they didn't actually get to the bottom, so they were not able to make the connection there. But they ended up, another team went to Camp 2 to check out a lead at the elbow, and they actually broke into borehole that basically continued straight up like that, all the way up there. And when they mapped it out, they were also like within 50 meters of connecting to Nidanashi. So it's very close to connecting, but the connection was not actually made. This is Camp Sky in Nidanashi, really beautiful. This is a photo leading up to the Supai room. So the Supai room was a huge room in Nidanashi, and the cave was surveyed 30 years ago, and I looked at the data, and the map was drawn like 7 years after it was surveyed. And long story short, the map was horrendously inaccurate. So on the map, it shows this upcoming room as like a very dinky little room, and this is what it is in actuality. So that was a really nice surprise to come into that. It's really beautiful. And it had incredible formations. One on the right's a little blurry, but it had huge soda straws and crazy helictites. And this was the Nidanashi team. So I just came in for a day of surveying, but the two on the right and on the one on the left, they spent most of their time rigging this cave. Plan de Escoba was the other big push, and they ended up finding a cave which they named Elysium, which kept going and going and going. So they were at a totally different base camp. I showed you the map earlier, they're way north. So that was an interesting logistical challenge because all of our resources were split in half, and we also had no communication. So people were always saying, oh, the Escoba people, they took all the bolts, you know. And there's kind of a rivalry, and they would be like, no, we didn't take any bolts, it was you guys. And then we could never talk to them, so we never were getting updates about what was going on until afterwards. But they found an incredible cave with tons of formations in it. There was a team, initially there was a team of 5 that went, so this was the initial part where they were seeing if they could find anything. They spent a week surveying this cave, and it appeared to end actually after, I want to say, a kilometer of gigantic borehole. It appeared to just end. So they came back to Waltla, and they were going to go back for one more push, but they weren't, that optimistic. But everyone that had been there all said it was the most beautiful cave they've ever seen. Obviously that's very relative, right? But it's quite a statement. Oh, I wish these photos were loading. So yeah, they had crazy like helictite and anthodite bushes, bat skeletons calcified in, all kinds of crazy formations. This is Fernando, who is a karst hydrologist. He's getting his master's degree in that, and he's the scientist for PESH. He's doing his research in Sistema Waltla. So he went over to Plan de Escoba to do a dye trace to see if it does indeed connect to the Waltla system, like I said, which is quite far away. This is just to give you an image of the magnitude of the borehole that they were dealing with. And since it was so well decorated, they did follow conservation procedures by taking off their shoes on delicate areas. And I don't know if they did lay webbing or flagging to mark trails, but they did stick to trails that they had created so as not to disturb more of the cave. They also found some really cool Pleistocene remains. So those were the main objectives. They ended up surveying, 3.5 miles of passage and to a depth of 1,500 feet, I believe. So this is Plan de Escoba, where our expedition was set up. This is the kitchen. PESH is a really cushy expedition in that we have our own chef. So there's this guy, a Mexican caver named Vico, who comes every year, and he loves nothing but to cook for cavers, especially when they get out at 4 a.m. after like a 12-hour journey, he will cook you whatever you want. So it's really nice to have that when you get out all haggard and exhausted. This is our gear room. So Pesh rents this room all year round, and at the end of the year we put everything into this room, and then during the expeditions they rent out other rooms for us to sleep in as well as the kitchen. So this is one of the sleeping quarters. This is the stoop right across from the kitchen. It's kind of the center of town, and that's where we hang out a lot. The shop down the road that says Corona is where people get their Coronas and their Victorias, as well as Coke and stuff like that, and chips. The lady on the left is Epifania, and she's our landlord, and she is really sweet, and she makes the most amazing tamales. And the kids in town, I loved interacting with the kids. Some cavers kind of just go about their business and do caving, which is fine. But I loved hanging out with them, even though I don't speak any Spanish. And they like to play basketball too, and they look sweet, but they are very aggressive with basketball. I have been punched many times. One day we were setting up and the kids were curious, looking in our bags. I don't have this in the photo, but just to the left, Fernando has all of his scientific equipment out, which they were very fascinated by, and I was too, as well. Alma is a really important person for our expedition, and she's actually the keynote speaker at the NSS convention this year. She was a local that found our group on Facebook, and she contacted Bill Steele and said, "I love what you guys are doing here. I think it's incredible and I want to get involved." And she has basically become the diplomat for us in Waltla, because she lives there. She's Mazatec. She doesn't fully speak Mazatec because it's kind of a dying language, but she speaks English and Spanish fluently as well as Mazatec, so she's a really great diplomat for us. This is Vico, the chef. He is another extremely important person on the expedition. This year he made a special friend. This is Pesha. She lived in the kitchen with us. Blake is another person that's really important. He's our surface support. He's the one that makes sure that we have clean water, which is very important. But despite his hard work, I still managed to get severe water poisoning. Totally not his fault. I went and got some water out of a rain bucket and decided that this would be good to brush my teeth with. And I did, and then I treated it and drank it later, and it tasted absolutely terrible. So I got really sick, like I could not walk. And I went to the local clinic and they gave me an IV and pumped me full of drugs. I don't know what they were. One of them was green, but it made me feel good. I was pretty happy when I left. And Yolanda is kind of our cleaning lady. In the past, Pesh had required that expedition members clean up after themselves and clean their own dishes. And apparently it was just a nightmare with, cavers not cleaning up, and Bill Steele would get very angry and yell at people, "Clean up your dishes." So they decided, let's just hire someone, because it's really cheap. And since then, there hasn't been any problem. She's been here since I started going to Pesh last year. And she's really, really sweet. When I was sick, she did a bunch of local treatments on me, which I really appreciated. I was feverish and ill, and she rubbed this herb on my stomach, which had some kind of cooling effect. And then she poured moonshine all over me and just rubbed me with it. And that was really nice because the alcohol kind of had a cooling effect on my skin, which was really hot from the fever. And she told me that someone had placed a curse on me so that I would not leave Mexico, which is why I was sick. And she gave me these herbs that I had to take a bath in to wash away the bad spirits, which I did. And I will say I did feel better after I took that shower, but I also had been taking antibiotics for 4 days. So, but it helped, and I really, really appreciated her efforts to help me. So the fire treatment is a form of entertainment at Pesh. Whenever you have any injury, they do this to you. It does hurt. So Bill is always very excited whenever anyone gets an injury because he gets to watch this. So I was one of them this year. And then the last part of the expedition is inventorying and packing up. This year we finished our expedition with one stainless steel bolt in the inventory. Yeah. So everyone complaining about people stealing bolts was very accurate. We were running short on bolts. And a lot of that was rigging Nidanashi. I think it was 650 or maybe 450 meters, and rigging down for that. Let's see. And then we had a end of expedition dinner in what is it called? Rose's Cafe, I think. And they've been friendly to cavers for a long time. There's a caver logbook there as well. Photo credits. So again, if you're interested in going to this expedition, you need to contact Bill Steele by August 1st. And like I said, you need to be good at climbing rope, passing relays. You need to know how to survey. If you know how to sketch, that's even better. And just generally be strong and physically fit. And they are very welcoming to newcomers. Once you contact them, you know, someone will obviously need to vouch for you, but yeah, they're pretty open to taking new people. So I highly recommend, if you're interested, to train if you're not already there, and yeah, contact Bill Steele. Does anyone have any questions? Jacob.
What was that green stuff in that one picture?
Oh, good question.
I was very alarmed.
Yeah, and for that reason, we are careful with circulating photos like that because it scares the locals. You know, for good reason, right? I don't know exactly what it is, and I feel like someone here does, but it's a dye.
Fluorescein.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a dye that they put in the water, and basically they set up dye tracing traps at the location where they're hoping to connect it to, and they take it before and after, and they see how much is present in the dye trap later, and then they can determine if there is a connection there. And depending how much dye is found, they can determine if it's like a direct connection or kind of filtered out. Do you want to add anything to that, Erin? I feel like you know a lot more.
Oh, I mean, that's what I've been red, or rosamine.
Yeah.
There's actually been some dye tracing done at the park. We all know that, yeah, when our sewer leaks, it goes into the cave.
Yeah. Yeah, so locals do get really freaked out when they see green water for good reason. So we try not to circulate images like that, especially to let the locals see it. But the dye is non-toxic. It is fine, but it is alarming. You're correct. Yeah. Chris.
What kind of time commitment? Like
2 weeks is the minimum for PAD. Yeah, which is another reason why it's a bit more accessible. Some other expeditions require a month. Yeah. Yes.
Is Fernando also at Western Kentucky University?
Yes.
We had coffee with him once. He's a
Oh,
very nice
cool.
man.
He's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's really nice. Did he come through here, or did you go to Kentucky?
We worked at Mammoth Cave and we met him there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Huh?
Bowling's a good thing.
Any other questions?
Do you know that I wrote a song about Pesh?
No, I didn't. Would you like to perform it?
Well, I pulled it up.
Should we switch?
Yeah, just plug out, plug in. So we're okay with playing the song since it's relevant?
Yeah.
See if she recognizes the folks on it.
Has this one been entered in any of those?
Yeah, won first prize.
Oh, man.
Oh, right.
I don't know if it'll be loud enough.
beneath the trees. Bells pealing back to Stillwater mysteries. Bells pealing back to Stillwater mysteries. Bells pealing back to Stillwater mysteries.
It's here for Sonia. Wow!